Story 1. David and Goliath. Long ago in Israel, during the reign of King Saul, there lived a young shepherd named David. David was the youngest of 8 brothers and often tended to his father's sheep. The prophet Samuel anointed David, indicating that he was chosen by God to become a great leader. David had a special gift, incredible courage and faith in God. When the Philistines waged war against Israel, they had a giant warrior named Goliath, who terrified everyone. Goliath challenged the Israelites to send someone to fight him, but no one dared. David, armed only with a sling and 5 smooth stones, stepped forward. Everyone was amazed at his bravery. David approached Goliath and, with a prayer in his heart, slung a stone that struck the giant on the forehead, killing him instantly. The Israelites were overjoyed and knew David had special strength from God. David's life was full of challenges and triumphs, always guided by his faith. David later became king and led Israel to many victories. His story teaches us that faith and courage in God can help us overcome the greatest obstacles. Story 2. Daniel in the Lion's Den. In ancient Babylon, there was a wise and devout man named Daniel. He was favored by the king for his wisdom and honesty. Daniel prayed to God 3 times a day without fail. Jealous officials tricked the king into making a law that prohibited prayer to anyone but the king. Daniel, faithful to God, continued to pray. He was caught and thrown into a den of hungry lions as punishment. Everyone expected Daniel to be devoured. Miraculously, God sent an angel to shut the lions' mouths. Daniel remained unharmed all night. The next morning, the king was overjoyed to find Daniel alive and released him. The king then decreed that everyone should honor Daniel's God. Daniel's story teaches us that faithfulness to God will protect us, even in the most dangerous situations. Story 3. Moses and the Red Sea. Long ago in Egypt, the Israelites were enslaved by Pharaoh. A baby named Moses was born to a Hebrew woman. To protect him from Pharaoh's decree to kill all Hebrew boys, his mother hid him in a basket in the river, where he was found and raised by Pharaoh's daughter. When Moses grew up, God spoke to him through a burning bush, commanding him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. With God's help, Moses performed miracles, and eventually, Pharaoh let the Israelites go. But Pharaoh changed his mind and pursued them with his army. At the edge of the Red Sea, with nowhere to go, Moses prayed to God. God instructed Moses to raise his staff, and the sea parted, allowing the Israelites to cross on dry land. When the Egyptians followed, the sea closed over them and they drowned. Moses' story teaches us that trusting in God can lead us through seemingly impossible situations to safety. Story 4. Joseph and his brothers. Long ago in Canaan, there was a young man named Joseph, who was the favorite of his father, Jacob. Joseph had the gift of interpreting dreams, which made his brothers jealous. One day, his brothers sold him into slavery in Egypt. Despite his hardships, Joseph remained faithful to God. He interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, predicting 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. Pharaoh made Joseph his second in command. During the famine, Joseph's brothers came to Egypt to buy food. They did not recognize Joseph, but he recognized them. Joseph tested their character and, seeing their remorse, revealed himself. They were reconciled, and Joseph forgave them, understanding it was part of God's plan. Joseph's story teaches us about forgiveness and trusting in God's plan, even when things seem bleak. Story 5. Esther saves her people. In the ancient Persian Empire, a Jewish girl named Esther was chosen to be queen. Esther was beautiful and wise, and she found favor with King Xerxes. A wicked man named Haman plotted to destroy all the Jews in the empire. Mordecai, Esther's uncle, urged her to speak to the king, even though approaching him without being summoned could result in her death. Esther prayed and fasted for 3 days before bravely approaching the king. The king welcomed her, and Esther revealed Haman's plot. The king was furious and ordered Haman to be executed. The Jews were saved, and Mordecai was honored. Esther's story teaches us about courage and standing up for what is right, trusting that God will protect us. Story 6. Elijah and the prophets of Baal. In Israel, during a time of great idolatry, there was a prophet named Elijah. Elijah was known for his fierce devotion to God. King Ahab and Queen Jezebel worshipped Baal, leading Israel astray. Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal to a contest on Mount Carmel to prove who the true God was. The prophets of Baal called upon their God all day, but nothing happened. Elijah prayed to God, and fire came down from heaven, consuming the offering he had prepared. The people saw this and proclaimed, "The Lord, He is God." The false prophets were defeated. Elijah's story teaches us about the power of faith and the importance of standing up for the truth. Story 7. Gideon's Battle. Long ago in Israel, the people were oppressed by the Midianites. A young man named Gideon was visited by an angel who told him that he would save Israel. Gideon was doubtful, but the angel assured him that God would be with him. Gideon gathered an army, but God told him to reduce it to just 300 men to show that the victory would be by his power. With faith, Gideon obeyed. He and his men surrounded the Midianite camp with torches and trumpets. At Gideon's signal, they blew the trumpets and broke the jars covering their torches, creating chaos among the Midianites. The Midianites were defeated, and Israel was freed. Gideon's story teaches us that with faith in God, even small numbers can achieve great victories. Story 8. Ruth and Naomi. In the land of Moab, there was a woman named Ruth who married into an Israelite family. When Ruth's husband died, she chose to stay with Naomi, her mother-in-law, and return to Israel with her, saying, "Your people will be my people, and your God my God." In Israel, Ruth gleaned fields to support Naomi. She found favor with Boaz, a kind and wealthy relative. Boaz married Ruth, and they had a son named Obed, who became the grandfather of King David. Ruth's story teaches us about loyalty, kindness, and how God blesses those who are faithful. Story 9. Samuel's Calling. In ancient Israel, a woman named Hannah prayed fervently for a child, promising to dedicate him to God. She named him Samuel and took him to live with the priest Eli when he was very young. One night, God called Samuel, who initially thought it was Eli calling. Eli realized it was God and told Samuel to say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." Samuel did so, and God spoke to him, giving him messages for Israel. Samuel grew up to be a great prophet and leader, guiding Israel with God's wisdom. His story teaches us about listening to God and being dedicated to his service from a young age. Story 10. Joshua and the Battle of Jericho. After Moses' death, Joshua became the leader of Israel. God commanded Joshua to take the city of Jericho. God instructed Joshua and his army to march around the city once a day for 6 days and 7 times on the 7th day, with priests blowing trumpets. On the 7th day, after the 7th lap, the priests blew a long blast and the people shouted. The walls of Jericho fell, and the Israelites took the city. Joshua's story teaches us about the power of obedience to God and the miraculous results it can bring. Follow for more.